Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the ICPA CPD for the beginning of September. Happy Spring Day to everybody. I see a few people want me to approve notes. That's no problem. As I say, welcome and a
Marianne, you want to listen to this cold chain thing?
very warm welcome to, I'm just muting everybody, sorry. Very warm welcome to Carrie de Beer, who has agreed to do the CPD for us. So Carrie currently works at the Western Cape Department of Health. She is in one of the hospitals. She has got a lot of experience in cold chain EPI vaccines. She's set up what do they call PTCs in hospitals. She is what we would call a clinical pharmacist, although these days there is now a postgraduate supplementary course. But Carrie, very warm welcome. People will carry on joining. We are recording the session. And as I've already mentioned, Carrie has indicated that she's going to share the slides with us, which I can send out to everybody. So we want to keep this short and sweet. We know all of you have been working hard today. So Carrie, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and to ICPA for the invitation. I'm going to try and keep my talk as concise and brief as possible. There's a lot of information on the slides, so I will run through it. That's why I'm very happy to share the slides later, so you can read a lot more. I don't feel you need me to read everything on the slides. So, I just want to see if I can get this to move forward. We managed just now. There we go. So just a bit of an overview of what we're going to speak about, the understanding of the elements of cold chain. So my job at the moment is I'm the policy specialist for cold chain in the Western Cape. So I look at cold chain across the province. We're going to look at the role of pharmacists and vaccines and a bit about our public-private partnerships, which I'm sure you're all interested in hearing about. I know it is rolling out again across the country, but in the Western Cape, we have very good public-private partnerships and a little bit of a take-home message for everybody. So I know everybody knows what cold chain is, but I love to go through this always. So the GPP defines cold chain as being thermolabile pharmaceutical products which require constant cold storage at a product-specific temperature below room temperature, which is normally 2 to 8 degrees, and it includes our vaccines. It is also our system of transporting and storing thermolabile pharmaceuticals while we maintain the recommended temperature. So when we look at this, we need to take note of what exactly is cold chain management. And it's the management of these thermolabile pharmaceuticals, right from their time of manufacture through the transport chain and to delivery to the pharmacy and administration to the client. So from the time it's manufactured to the administration to the client, that is our cold chain management. It also includes any forecasting that they need to do on a global platform as well. So we mustn't forget about that. And it's also about delivering the right vaccine. If we're talking about vaccines, at the right place, the right time, in the right quantities, our right condition, and the right cost. So why do we focus so much on cold chain? It's because we want to maintain the shelf life of all our thermolabile pharmaceuticals, not only our vaccines, to preserve their potency and efficacy. We know that vaccines have a fixed shelf life and they are they have a high cost value, and we want to prevent our wastage. We also want to improve our confidence in the healthcare system. So that is one of our very big, important take-homes from this. And what is the role of the pharmacist in all of this? Your role is in your product procurement, how you store, handle, and transport any of your thermolabiles if you are transporting them to outreaches. And pharmacists are at the end chain of our cold chain process. So we need to ensure that our pharmaceutical products are stored in safe and temperature-controlled environments using the correct equipment. As we all know, we are the custodians of medicine, and this is quite high up in our duty of care. So the GPP outlines minimum processes that we need to adhere to, and these are we have SOPs, and it is something that we have to adhere to. It's a non-negotiable. We have to manage the procurement, storage, distribution. So these are most of you would know this, and ultimately to look at any disruptions in the cold chain and the waste management thereof. So if we look at our cold chain equipment, I don't know if this top is coming into I've got this top. Yeah, okay. So our cold chain equipment, we're going to focus in this presentation on our fridges, a little bit about our passive containers and the type of packs that we look at, as well as our temperature recording devices. Okay, so I know I'm in public, but in public we talk about our WHO PQS fridges. So these are all fridges that meet the requirements of WHO in terms of performance, quality, and safety. And we like to use our solid door fridges because we know these can hold the temperature range between 2 and 8 for a minimum of 48 hours at an ambient temperature of 43 degrees. And this is quite important for our vaccines, especially in our more rural and outlying areas or when we were having load shedding. We do still use some of our non-PQS fridges, so our glass door fridges. The downside is that these fridges, if there is a failure in the fridge or they get switched off for whatever reason, within 15 minutes, the contents of that fridge already reaches the ambient room temperature. And we do have facilities that still use domestic fridges, although it's not ideal. So I'm just showing you some pictures of, I go out into the audits in the Western Cape, into facilities. So I'm showing you a little bit of our pictures that we see. These are fridges that I've seen in facilities, although the one to the left is a glass door fridge, but they are packed and they adhere to our pharmaceutical measures, SAPC measures, and our GPP measures. And so these are just some more of the fridges that I've come across, which have been good. And then I also do find fridges which absolutely look atrocious. So things like the freezing component has more than 10 millimeters of ice. Our vaccines are thrown into the fridges. They're stored incorrectly. They in the domestic fridge on the left. They're not supposed to be stored in the the vegetable tray. And also we like to look after our fridges. So I'm going to touch on briefly maintenance of fridges, which is here. So we're going to look at fridge maintenance. So we want to make sure that we look after our fridges. We want to rather do preventative maintenance on our fridges. It's a part of our SAPC inspections. We need to have monthly cleaning rosters as well as maintenance records for our fridges. So we rather want to prevent our fridges breaking down. So we do preventative measures versus doing corrective is something unplanned, and generally it's costs a lot to repair these fridges when it is unplanned. So by looking after the fridges, so keeping them clean, that sort of thing is quite a high focus when we in the public sector. Just to mention with the fridges, how we pack the fridges is quite important. The placement of the fridges, we're looking at first in, first out principles. We pack our vaccines according to their VVM status. We ensure they are never packed more than 70% capacity to ensure that there's adequate airflow. We also don't keep vaccines in the door of the fridges or in the salad trays, as I've mentioned, or allowing vaccines to come into contact with an evaporator plate at the bottom. And we do store vaccines such as OPV, so our oral polio vaccines, and our BCGs into the freezer to preserve and prolong their lifespan, because they tend to expire very quickly based on the exposure to heat. This is just an example of packing a fridge. So if you have a domestic fridge, we often advise to take water packs, water bottles, and put them at the bottom, because it keeps the temperature of the fridge at a constant temperature. So that is something that we do advocate in domestic fridges. I'm sure you've all got temperature charts. So I'm not going to focus too heavily on this, but this is some of the temperature charts, which we do need to look at, making sure that you have access to them and they are near your fridges and they are you monitoring the temperatures and recording it twice a day. So I just thought I'd focus a little bit on the passive containers. So your fridge is a different thing, but your passive container is your cooler box, which you would use to store your vaccines during the day during your immunization session. They have to have a thermal. They need to be thermally insulated with a lid. So we only use these for short-term storage, as I said, for our immunization session, and we choose our passive container based on the storage capacity that we need just for our immunization session, and also just to ensure that our vaccines are stored when we store them, we're using the appropriate ice packs, and that the ice packs, we need to make sure that the temperature is maintained in these cooler boxes for twice the length of time of our immunization session. So the coolant packs that we advocate for are our water-filled coolant packs. We like to we kind of instill in our facilities not to use the gel packs because they get frozen and the vaccines get put on these, which impacts the vaccine. So we don't like to use those, which I'll explain a bit later. So we use water-filled packs, which we condition. These are flat packs. They are leak-proof. We fill them up with tap water. They are stored in the freezer until they come out to be conditioned. I don't know if you're aware about how to condition. So you take your frozen water packs out the freezer, you leave it on the side, on a table or at the sink, and you leave it there until it reaches what we call crackle stage, or you can rattle it, and it's a mix between water and ice. That is when you know that the ice pack is conditioned, and you can place it into your vaccine carriers. Very often you can put paper around it or something like that because of the condensation if you don't want your boxes to become wet. So you are allowed to do that, or a little bit of bubble wrap around them, but not too much insulation around the conditioned pack. So when you pack your passive container, your vaccine carrier, you only need to use the appropriate number of conditioned ice packs that will make sure that the temperature range is kept between 2 and 8. If you're using the blue WHO cooler boxes, there's a specific formula, but you will have to, if you're using a regular cooler box, you need to determine how many cooler packs you use to ensure your temperature range is maintained. The smaller cooler boxes, we find sometimes even one of the the ice packs, depending on the size of it, is sufficient. Sometimes we use 2 smaller ones. So when you pack your cooler box, your ice packs go against the side of the vaccine carrier, not at the bottom. So against the side and not on the top, unless they are the cold boxes. Generally, you place your vaccines that are not cold sensitive, your OPV and your BCG at the bottom, because the cold air sinks, and then your other vaccines go on top of that, and they must never be in direct contact with the ice packs. And then you use your 30-day temperature monitoring device, whether you're using a fridge tag or a log tag, that generally goes into the middle of the vaccine carrier. You must also ensure that the lid of the vaccine carrier it seals well, so you are able to close it properly. Okay, so these are some examples of poorly packed boxes I've seen in the facilities. I'm going to touch a little bit on the multi-dose vial policy, where you can see these are vaccines that were drawn up at the bottom on the left and placed directly with just a piece of paper in contact with frozen bricks. You can see the white on those bricks. It was actually the frost, so they were freezing the vaccines. The top right, that's a gel pack that had been taken out of a fridge, and within a few minutes, it's actually warm. So those vaccines were sitting in a K-Lite box, kind of getting warm. Yeah, and at the bottom, the vaccines had also been frozen. So these are, I see a lot of poorly packed cooler boxes in facilities. Some more examples. The one on the right-hand side with the blue lid, that was a frozen brick that had been put on top of all the vaccines. So as you know, cold air sinks and all those vaccines underneath it were, yeah, below 0 degrees when we looked at the log tag. So these are some of, I've put this as well packed, but have issues. So on the, let's have a look at the bottom picture. You'll see there are 2 dial thermometers. We don't like dial thermometers as it only gives a temperature at a specific point in time. When you look at the dial thermometer, we need continuous monitoring. It's one of the new measures that have come in where all your cooler boxes for immunization or EPI sessions, you need to download and have download the temperature charts and have a record of what happened to the in the immunization session, what happened to the temperatures in the cooler box. So this is quite a recent measure that's actually came out a couple of months ago. So just of note, so in having dial thermometers, you're not able to determine what happened to the vaccines during the 6 hours of the immunization session. Also, it's beautifully packed in a little container, but it had been put on top of frozen bricks. So it was freezing some of those vaccines. And then in the right-hand side, the log tag was up against the ice bricks. So it was measuring the temperature of the conditioned ice packs, whereas it not measuring the temperature that was surrounding the vaccines. So yeah, we can only assume that the temperature around the vaccines was fine, but it doesn't determine that. It's measuring different temperature. So I'm just going to focus on the bottom left one. That's perfectly placed. You've got your vaccines in a container. They're not touching the conditioned ice bricks, and there's a log tag, so we know what's happening to those vaccines in that little bucky container. So when we talk about what happens to the vaccines when we store them, so this is a container that's been packed with frozen ice bricks versus conditioned ice packs versus cool water or warm water packs. And if you look at it, our conditioned ice packs are the only ones that maintain the storage of the vaccines in the cooler box at the recommended 2 to 8 degrees for up to 35 hours. So that is why we advocate conditioned ice packs versus your frozen ice pack. In your frozen ice pack, that is your gel packs. So as you can see, that little orange line, within minutes of putting your vaccines in with a frozen gel pack, it's going down to close to, I think that was about -8. So you're already freezing your vaccine. So you've already destroyed the integrity of your vaccines. Okay, so this was an experiment where they took frozen ice packs in a passive container with vaccines touching the frozen pack, and then with frozen packs where the vaccines are not touching the frozen pack. So regardless of whether the vaccine's touching or not touching the frozen ice pack, you can see there it's going down to about -8 if it's not touching, and down to about -11.5 degrees Celsius if it is touching. I love this graph because it is so interesting. It tells us about our heat sensitivity versus our freeze sensitivity vaccines. So any vaccines to the left of the line will not be damaged by freezing, whereas the other ones will be damaged by freezing. And it also shows you vaccines which are freeze sensitive and their heat sensitivity. So that's why we don't want to expose them to greater than 8 degrees. So it's a great graph, especially if you have a vaccine going out of range. You can see where you sit if it has been frozen versus if it was exposed to extreme temperatures. Just a tip, so any vaccine that has a T in it, we know it should not be exposed to freezing conditions. So it's your hepatitis, your diluents, rota vaccines, tetanus conjugated PCV. So that's just some examples. I've put together, so these are some examples of our temperature recording devices. The log tags and the fridge tags, and to the top left is a higher device. These record, that can be kept in the fridges or your cooler boxes. It records for 30 days. The other two on the right-hand side is your My Fridge Online or your Comet devices. That's your remote temperature monitoring devices, which will send an SMS alert for your fridges. So that's just some examples of temperature monitoring devices. If you have any vaccine or any thermolabile pharmaceutical going out of range, as you know, one of our requirements is to do investigation. So here's just a graph to show you that where there have been some temperature excursions, which you need to investigate. Going back to our temperature monitoring devices, as I've explained, the dial thermometers on the right-hand side, we don't use these because it just gives you a temperature at the point when you look at it, and the freeze tag can only tell you whether something was exposed to freezing conditions. So it's not going to help you for our SAPC requirements. And then just to look in terms of managing excursions and what you should do. So if there's been a temperature out of range for more than 12 degrees for 15 minutes or less, this is not regarded as a temperature excursion or a cold chain breach. But if it is more than 15 minutes, you do need to take action. So I will leave this and you can have a look at it later. It's just what to do if a temperature goes down between 2 and 0 degrees, if it goes higher than 8 and up to about 25, or if the temperature falls below 0, in which case there's a high probability your vaccines or your thermolabile pharmaceuticals have been exposed to freezing conditions. So you do need to quarantine your stock and either perform the shake test or get stability information from the suppliers. So it's a very important. Another measure for Pharmacy Council is that we need to all have contingency plans and SOPs. And your contingency plans, everybody should know what to do. You know the actions you need to take, and you should have another facility or pharmacy where you can move your stock to if you do not have adequate capacity at your pharmacy. And you should just revisit your contingency plan from time to time. Okay, so I'm just going to touch a little bit on vaccines when they do arrive at the facility. It's very important that you manage these quickly and you take them from their delivery and you put them into your own fridges. Just remember that they come with a log tag or a downloadable device of the temperature, and you should download that. Whether the delivery company wants to take that little device away with them, download it before they do so. Because if there has been a temperature excursion during the transport process, the stock will need to be uplifted. Just as an aside, we've had in the last 3 weeks, we've received stock of our PCV10 that we've had to uplift twice because it has been exposed to freezing conditions. So yeah, it's very important to monitor it and then engage with the supplier to uplift if there has been a temperature excursion. Also, the stock that you receive from your supplier, leave it in the original packaging. This is a picture of one of our nurses, absolutely amazing nurse, but she had taken all the stock out of the original packaging, put it into little containers, and put it into a fridge on the freezing element. So all her stock was frozen. We had to have a look at what we could, assess what we could. What was still usable and not usable, and discard the rest. So just be aware of how you store your vaccines. And then diluents. Diluents are not interchangeable. They should be stored in your fridge with a vaccine. So if your measles has a diluent, store the diluent next to the measles, and you use the manufactured specific diluent for the vaccine. Okay, they also should not be frozen. And then just to touch a bit on the vaccine vial monitors, when we do have vaccine vial monitors, before we use the vaccines, before we administer to our patients, we need to look at our vaccine vial monitors, and if it's beyond a discard point, so that means that little square color is the same or darker than the outside square. That's discard point, or beyond discard point when it goes even darker. And then we discard those vaccines. We cannot use them. So the vaccine vial monitor is there it's not to measure the potency of the vaccine. It's there to look at the heat exposure of the vaccine over time. So every time you're taking it in and out the fridge, and what is happening to the vaccine while it's being stored in the passive containers, that is what we are looking at. Just a hint about the vaccine vial monitor, the VVM, if it is on the vaccine itself, that means the vaccine can be used, if it's a multi-dose vial, for 28 days. If it's on the top, on the cap, that means it only has a 6-hour expiry, because once you take it off the cap, you can't see it. So it's a 6-hour, and that's a tip how you know whether a vaccine, because often people say, I don't know whether I can use this for 6 hours or 28 days. So if it's on the top cap, which you discard when you open it, that's a 6-hour or expiry, or when the immunization session is over, if it falls between then. I'm just going to touch briefly on the multi-dose vial policy. So that is any vaccine or thermolabile pharmaceutical included in this is your insulins that you will use for multiple doses. There are certain rules that we need to adhere to. So we can only use these vials if they have been on the vial, a vaccine itself, or the insulin or whatever that you're using, the date and time was recorded when it was opened. So yeah, that is part of our multi-dose vial policy. The little vials must be stored under appropriate cold chain conditions. The septum of the vial should not have been submerged in water if it was sitting in a container, and you must have used aseptic techniques when using it. Okay. This is a shake test. So if a vaccine has been frozen, you can do the shake test. It's called the golden test. It's to check if the vaccine has been frozen, or if, and you are still able to use it. You use a control vial. So you take another vaccine of the same batch and expiry, and you then use that as a control versus your frozen vaccine. If the sediment falls rapidly, you cannot use it. But if your sediment falls gradually as compared to your control, it is still safe to use. I'm just going to quickly touch on vaccine wastage. So for our multi-dose vaccines, we do expect a high and we have an acceptable wastage rate, which is quite high, because we would rather immunize our patients or our clients, our babies, than not immunize. So for example, BCG, we expect about 80% of the vaccines to be wasted if you are immunizing every child that comes into your pharmacy. Whereas a single dose vial, such as your rotavirus, we expect very low wastage, because wastage should only be if the vaccine has expired or you've had a fridge failure and the VVM is beyond discard point. Then this is a chart how you would monitor your vaccine wastage and work out your wastage rate. Yeah, so in terms of vaccine wastage, we have two types of wastage. One is which we call avoidable, and one unavoidable. So the unavoidable wastage is what we don't want. And some of our poor practices do result in, unfortunately, unavoidable wastage. It's when we are not adhering to a multi-dose vial policy. We're using what we call porcupines into the top of the vial, because we think it's going to create a port that we can easily draw up one dose and then the next dose, so subsequent doses. Unfortunately, it creates a port for contamination. And then also, as part of our multi-dose vial policy, sometimes we have gone into facilities and found that some of our nurses think that they can just draw up a whole lot of vaccines, and when the clients come in, they can use those. But nobody knows, because the syringes are not, there's no indication of when it was drawn up, how long it has been there, or what even the contents are. And as you can see in the little kidney dish, the vaccines sitting in this cooler box were at, what's that, 12 degrees. So yeah, so that we had to throw those away. So yeah, part of our multi-dose vial policy as well is that it's one needle, one vaccine. We don't use multiple needles to draw up vaccines. We use the same needle that we use to draw up the vaccine to administer. Okay, so I'm just going to touch on a little bit about immunization versus vaccination. So vaccination is when you actually get the vaccine, whether it is by injection, drop into the mouth, or it's swallowed. And immunization is a process of getting the vaccine and then developing immunity to a disease as a result. And so immunization is important because it reaches more people than any other health or social service. So it's a vital component of our healthcare. We always say that every day is an immunization day. Yeah, so I just thought I'd just focus a little bit on some of our vaccines that you see in the facilities. You will find some vaccines are referred to as live attenuated versus inactivated vaccines. So the first vaccine was developed in 1796 to treat smallpox. And since then, many other vaccines have been developed. So well, one of these is our live attenuated vaccines, which is where we have live pathogens from either a bacteria or a virus that have been attenuated. Attenuated means that it has been weakened. And because these vaccines contain a live pathogen, the immune system reacts very well, and our bodies typically remember the pathogen for quite a long time. So very often, we don't need to have additional doses or booster doses down the line. And some examples of live attenuated vaccines is measles and mumps. Sorry. Okay, and then let me go here. What are these? Inactivated vaccines. Inactivated vaccines take a live pathogen, and then they inactivate or they kill it, and then they reintroduce it into the humans when we have our vaccine. And it is strong enough to create this is strong enough to create an immune response, but it is not strong enough that it will cause a disease. And very often we need multiple doses in order to build up immunity and to offer us full protection. They are relatively inexpensive to make in comparison to the live attenuated vaccines. And some examples of these are our polio vaccines and our influenza vaccines. Then I'm going to just briefly touch on our subunit vaccines. These are vaccines that are made from a piece of a pathogen, so not the whole organism. So therefore, they do not contain any live pathogen, and they are our polysaccharide vaccines, as well as our conjugate vaccines and our protein-based vaccines. These examples are, I'm just trying to think now, sorry, it's our hepatitis B vaccines, pertussis, Haemophilus influenza type B, and our PCV, those are pneumococcal vaccines. Then we have our toxoid vaccines. They use inactivated toxins to target the toxic activity which has been created by the bacteria. So they don't target the bacteria itself. So the actual goal of the toxoid vaccine is to give people a way to neutralize the toxins by antibodies through vaccination. And we use these in tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. And with our toxoid vaccines, we do need booster shots or booster vaccines about every 10 years or so. Okay, so our viral vector vaccines, I'm not really going to touch on this, but from COVID days, you would have heard a lot about the mRNA and your viral vector vaccines. But what I would like to just touch on is I'm sure you've heard about our zero-dose children. These are children who have never received a vaccine containing diphtheria, pertussis, or tetanus in their first dose. So it's our hexavalent or hexaxim first dose. If a child has not received this, we consider them to be a zero-dose child. This is just, I'm touching on the EPI routine schedule. I'm sure you have these in your pharmacy as well as the catch-up schedule. But I just wanted to show you that our targets, so with our EPI vaccines, our measles coverage first dose and second dose, we are looking for high targets of at least 95% of our children vaccinated. But unfortunately, we're sitting at under 80%, it's under 80% of our children being covered. And this is why it's quite important that the public healthcare sector partner with private healthcare pharmacies to improve our immunization coverage. We would like to have at least 90% of our babies covered with immunizations within their first year, but we are way under that as well. So you can have a look from our targets. You will see that even though our targets are quite high, we are not meeting our targets. So because of this, we are experiencing vaccine preventable diseases outbreaks. At the moment, I don't know about the other provinces, but I know in the Western Cape, we have a huge problem with the measles outbreak, as well as diphtheria. So those are two things that we are really, it is burdening our healthcare sector at the moment, both in the public and private sector. And it's important to note that vaccines work. They help with our drug susceptible pathogens. So we really want to target our population and to prevent our antibiotic usage, because we're using so many antibiotics to treat these vaccine preventable diseases. So I'm sharing this because I think it's quite important to remember that our vaccines protect us. They safeguard our communities. They decrease our infections and antibiotic use, as well as if an individual, so we had with our measles outbreak or our diphtheria outbreak, if our individuals had been vaccinated, if they had had the vaccination, they would not be as sick as they were. They would not be presenting to our healthcare facilities, to our ICUs. So our burden is much higher because we are not reaching our vaccine targets. I love this model. So as you can see currently, worldwide, there's about 10 million deaths due to cancer. About a tenth of that, our mortality rate due to antimicrobial resistance, about a tenth of that. But they are predicting that by 2050, we will start superseding the mortality rate of cancer. This is because we are not reaching our vaccination targets, both in children and adults. So just to touch quickly on our viral diseases versus our bacterial. So our viral is our rabies, our influenzas, and our bacterial is our diphtheria. And we're moving away from EPI-based schedules to life course immunizations. I love this. It's just that a reminder that we do need booster vaccines and to prevent some of our diseases, no matter what. So as I've mentioned, I'm just going to touch briefly on the diphtheria outbreak. It is not specific to the Western Cape. These are some of our cases across the country. We have, it's a high burden to everybody. I've highlighted the Western Cape, but Mpumalanga is seeing increase in cases. It's across the country. And as you can see, in 2025, we are peaking with our diphtheria cases. You can see Gauteng versus KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, Limpopo. The green is the Western Cape. So it is a huge problem. So I'm going to now touch on our public-private collaborations in the Western Cape. We have what's called a strategic purchasing unit, which facilitate public facilities access to governmental stock and the services that they can access. So it's family planning, immunizations, TB, HCT testing. They can access stock to treat STIs, cervical screening, antenatal, influenza. It's a whole host of services with our collaboration with our public partners. As you can see, there's a focus on family planning and EPI, and a lot of our pharmacists that have PCDT permits are partnering with our public facilities. This is our geographical coverage of private facilities in partnership with government across the Western Cape. It is a lot in the metro, but I'll show you the breakdown. So you can see there are some workplace and GP practices that are in partnership, but most of our partners are actually with pharmacy or pharmacists, private pharmacists. About 60%, just under 60% in the metro, but the rural does also have access to our stock. And then, so it's about 36% of our entities that are in partnership with the Western Cape government are PCDT pharmacists. Okay, so before you partner with our governments, with the government, and access to our stock, we do go out and we conduct inspections, and we look at your medicine supply management, your cold chain, your information management, so how you collect your data, your infrastructure. There's quite a few things that we do, and we have scorings. And once you have been approved, you sign a memorandum of understanding. It's a 5-year contract, and biannually, so every 6 months, somebody from one of our public facilities will go out to the private facility and just do, we call it an audit, but just do some checks and make sure that everything is still adhering to the memorandum of understanding. Yeah, so that's a little bit about that. The pharmacies need to submit their stats, especially with the EPI stats, and that has to be done monthly. There is a benefit because it definitely is strengthening our relationship in the public-private sector, and it does provide a lot more access to care for the community. It helps us a lot in reaching our EPI targets. So I've just done a slide with some of the responsibilities of pharmacists in terms of overall cold chain. And then some polls that I have is about strengthening our private-public partnerships. Public health is a shared responsibility, whether you work in government or you work in private. So we need to collaborate and we need to strengthen that. Yeah, as I've explained, it's convenient for the public to go to the private facilities, and you do offer extended operating hours. Pharmacists are trusted health advisors. So by partnering up, we're having a continual community engagement. It's economies of scale, and as I've explained, you're able to reach hard to reach populations and help us in looking at where we have missed opportunities for immunizations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie. That was a heck of a lot of information, but very useful information. Carrie, I've seen quite a few questions coming up in the chat, so I'm going to first put those to you, and then I'm going to
Okay.
open up to the audience. So the first one says many children have missed their six week, 10 and 14-week schedules and need to catch up. Are the current catch-up schedules accurate? So I think the answer
Um,
there is yes, they are very
yes,
detailed catch-up
yes.
schedules.
I can go back here. Yes, it's very detailed, and the catch-up schedule is really good. I must just go back to that slide because it will explain to you if you. Here we go. This catch-up schedule. So it explains to you when you can and you can't give. So if, for example, let's look at the hexavalent. You can still give it to the child up to the age of 5 years. So when you give the first dose, they will tell you, sorry, you can give it up to 18 months, 18 months old. So it will explain to you after you give your first dose, your second dose will be a minimum of 4 weeks later, and your third dose a minimum of 4 weeks after the second dose. So this is actually very accurate, this catch-up schedule.
And I think the one that's important to remember, Carrie, is the rotavirus. I think that's the only one that has a very narrow window, isn't it?
The upper age limit there is 24
Yes.
weeks for the
Yes.
rotavirus. Yes.
So if they've missed the rotavirus and they come in after 2 years, you don't give the
You don't give
rotavirus.
it.
Yeah.
No, no,
But I think,
no.
as you say, they're very detailed schedules. So if anybody needs that, we can supply that to you.
Yes.
Perfect. And I mean, we're going to get these slides as well, which is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Then,
And Jackie, also Sanofi have printed a whole lot of EPI schedules and catch-up schedules, and they are really good. So we can organize drop-off points for posters. Their posters are very accurate and up to date. But with the slides, you'll be able to get the schedules off my slides as well. These are the latest.
fantastic. And I see this is the latest because the updates were the fact that you're now giving measles and rubella
Yes.
together, where it
Yes.
used to just be measles. So I know that
Yeah.
was a new one that was added in 2025. And of course, one of the new vaccines as well in 2025 is the DTaP for pregnant women.
Yes. So the Tdap is for pregnant women from 24 to 36 weeks, or up and you can get, yeah. So that we're aiming for that. We are advocating it at the moment because of the diphtheria outbreak and also
Correct.
pertussis as well. We have seen quite a few cases of pertussis. And then with the Tdap, we're doing a lot in the schools, giving to
Yes.
grade 5, yeah, boys and girls in public and private institutions. So yes,
Great. So then the
there's
next one says, what's the situation with tetanus vaccines? They've been out of stock for a while, but then somebody replied and said the SIPLA vaccines are available. So I think if
yes.
there have been shortages of tetanus, let us know. I'm not aware of any shortage in the public sector
No,
of
there is
tetanus.
there is no shortage in the public
Yeah.
sector. And if you do have a partnership with, if you're a private pharmacy and are in partnership with a public facility, you should have access.
Okay. One thing
And
that did
yeah,
happen, Carrie, there was a time when private facilities couldn't get the BCG for newborns.
I know it because stock was limited, and I don't know why. Oh, a lot of it, a lot of it is because they were adamant that BCG was being given in the hospitals as a first dose. But we realize not all newborns are being given BCG or the oral polio. So that is one of the reasons why it is now in the private sector. So you can do the catch-up doses.
Okay, fantastic. All right, the next one says temperature monitoring is key, and many public facilities are not geared to deal with monitoring. Has this been made a priority? So this is somebody from the from the Gauteng province, because I know it's a priority in the Western Cape. And I
Yeah.
don't think you can probably comment on the other provinces.
Unfortunately, I cannot comment on the other provinces. I know the pharmacists, the cold chain pharmacists in the other province, but I don't know their practices. Yeah, I don't have
Yeah.
access to that at
No,
all.
absolutely. I mean, it
Yeah.
has to be a priority, because
It
if the
is yeah,
vaccines haven't been stored properly, they're not going to be efficacious.
yeah,
Efficacious.
efficacious. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, then the next one says many organizations, when training on immunization courses, encourage changing the needle that you draw up the vaccine with a different needle to inject. Is this correct?
No, it's absolutely incorrect. Um, I worked on the new cold chain manual for the country a year ago. That still hasn't been released, but we worked on that a year ago. That goes against a multi-dose vial policy. It's one needle, one immunization. So you don't you don't change needles. That practice was done away with quite a couple of years ago,
Now
pre-COVID, actually,
that's
pre-COVID.
interesting. Okay, that's interesting, Carrie, because I did the course through NMU recently,
Yeah,
and they absolutely tell you to change the needle. So maybe
absolutely
if you
right.
can get that info to me, I will send it to
Yeah,
Ilse Kruter, who is
yeah,
doing that
it's actually
course.
wrong. It is actually wrong. We've
Okay,
stopped that, yeah. Yeah.
okay. Then there's a question here, how can we partner with government in Gauteng? So you won't be able to answer that one. We have also tried numerous avenues without success. We got quite far with an MOU with Gauteng, and then
Okay.
COVID hit. And I think what we need to do, and here I'm talking to the members, Carrie, we
Yeah.
need to engage with the departments again. So at the moment, our focus is on KZN. We've got
Okay.
the head of pharmaceutical services coming to our conference, and we're
Okay.
hoping to get some sort of pledge out of him to start this. So I do know from talking to Nicholas Crisp, Prof. Nicholas Crisp,
Yes.
from NHI perspective, they definitely, from a national perspective, want these
Yes.
public-private partnerships put in place.
I do
Unfortunately,
know, yes, I do know from going to national meetings that it is high priority to have it rolled
absolutely.
out across the country. But Jackie, what I can do is I can put you in touch with Inga and from I know it as a BDU, our SPU, the Strategic Partnership Unit. And if you have somebody coming from another province, they can make an appointment because we have had these partnerships with the private sector for quite a long time. So there is a lot of resources available, and sometimes, we could, we need to share with the other provinces how it works. If you also drop me a line, I will put you in touch with the cold chain pharmacist at in Gauteng, and maybe you need to engage with them directly for your private facilities.
That would be super, Carrie, because in our interactions, we've basically been told that they don't have budget. But I mean, that's like saying, well, you're not going to vaccinate people. The priority is to get everybody vaccinated. And as you know, here in the Western Cape, I mean, Carrie, I had a PPP, or PPI as they called it in those days, signed with the Western Cape DOH back in 1991. So they've been going a long time.
Yeah.
And, to say there isn't budget is just not on. We need to get these done. So, yes, I will definitely make contact with you in the probably next week, not this week, and get
Mhm.
those details from you. All right, let's see if there is anything else here. I don't see anything else in the chat. Anybody wish to ask Carrie any questions? Just please put up your hands or unmute and go ahead, Suraj.
Hello.
Hi.
Quick question. Is um the spreadsheet still being used, the Excel spreadsheet? And have you any plans to modernize that in terms of the stock monitoring processes? And the electronic version of the Road to Health, is that still around? And are you guys keen on a public-private partnership around tracking immunization electronically? Thank you.
Okay, I can't answer for that because that's a national measure. Yes, they are looking. I know that National is looking at an electronic register to record vaccines. But at the moment, the provinces are recording and then on their systems. We in the Western Cape use Sinjani or PHIS to record our vaccine stats. And from there, National are drawing the stats. Yeah, so it's up to provinces. I don't know how it's done in other provinces. Yeah, we are recording electronically though.
And the reporting, Carrie. So I know back in my
Oh,
day, it was a
reporting.
spreadsheet that you reported your usage each month. And when you placed your order, is it still on a spreadsheet?
Unfortunately, yes, it
Okay.
is. It is. And when it gets to district level, it's inputted.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah, that is actually, it is one of our failings.
Okay.
Everything
So
could
I
be done electronically.
absolutely. So I do know, and Ahmed, you're online here, so I'm going to put you on the spot. So Ahmed has been meeting with Sadiq and the team to look at improving the, for instance, electronic health records. I think they call it single view. Is
Oh,
it?
SPV,
Yes,
single
SPV,
patient viewer.
single patient view and things like that. Ahmed,
Mhm.
has there been any talk of becoming more digital in these reporting and such like?
Jackie, there is, but it's mostly based on what is currently available. And they talk about, in fact, in yesterday's meeting, they talked about the ability to track and trace and see what's happening globally in the Western Cape, right down to very, very small sub-districts and so on. But they haven't gone into the space where Siraj is talking about how can this be switched over into an electronic format. And that's something I will raise in the next meeting.
Absolutely.
I,
Thanks.
I, I think in the public facilities, we have access to um, electronic reporting, but the problem is with our private providers.
Yeah.
That is one of our biggest gaps. We don't have. They
Okay.
don't. Yeah.
Super. So I see also a question here, Carrie. You mentioned that PCDT pharmacists are contracted on the PPI, and the question is, are there any non-PCDT? So even I can answer that. You don't have to be a PCDT pharmacist. You can have done the immunization supplementary training. You register that with Pharmacy Council. You then apply for a Section 22A15 permit. And you have to have that permit. So a lot of people, Carrie, ask me, why do we need a permit when all these EPI vaccines are Schedule 2? And of course, the answer is the emergency tray medicines are Schedule 4. And so to get access to those, you have to have a permit, which then expands your scope to include those medicines which are not Schedule 2. So you don't have to have PCDT, but I think what you were saying, Carrie, is that having a PCDT gives you
Oh, yeah.
access to family planning and EPI
And
vaccines.
yes, and to STI treatments and prep, and it gives you a lot more access. So it's what it, yeah. So you don't have
Okay.
to be PCDT pharmacist. Um, but even a public facility or a hospital or a primary healthcare facility has to have a Section 22A permit to be able to keep vaccines on site. So we
Okay.
even have those in our facilities. So it is not only
Private.
private facilities. No, it's
Yeah.
it's so that we can also um, give the vaccines. Yeah, keep
And
and
that's
keep the
even,
vaccine.
and even if you're in a pharmacy and it's a nurse doing it, you still need to get that permit. So either the
Yes,
pharmacist must have the permit if it's a pharmacist that's doing the
yes,
vaccination, or if a nurse is doing the vaccinations, then they must apply for a permit. And I think that's very important. Pharmacy Council is finding many of our members non-compliant because they are giving vaccines in the pharmacy and they don't have permits. I
And
see
yes.
Simone.
Sorry, Jackie, just
Yes.
to go on it, the permit is linked to a person in a private, it's often linked to a person, but in public, it's linked to a facility.
Yeah, no, in private is definitely linked. It is a
To a
person who gets the
person.
permit linked to
Yes.
a facility. And
Yeah.
often we get nurses who are coming from a public facility that think that the permit they were working under transfers
No.
into the private sector, and it
No,
doesn't.
it doesn't. It doesn't, because in public, it's linked to a facility, whereas in private, it's linked to an individual. So that's a
Okay.
difference between our government in our government facilities. Yeah.
Thanks. Simone says, in terms of delivery of insulins or other fridge items to patients from the pharmacy, could
Yeah.
ICPA perhaps look into the cost of the ice packs for conditioning, thermologgers? We haven't encountered SAPC issues on inspection with the polystyrene and gel packs, but I'm concerned during the summer months. Simone will definitely look into that. I was thinking about that. We need to look into those. Was it a 30-day or 28-day loggers that you were talking about,
Yeah.
Caroline? Okay.
So yes, it's a 30-day logger. Yeah. So it's always good to band together and do contracts or tenders under the ICPA umbrella, because you can get discounts or discounted prices.
Absolutely. No, we'll
If you work
definitely
in
do
the
that.
code.
So I'll have a look at the ones that are on your slides. That will be very helpful. And Simone will definitely look into getting something long term. We are hoping, together with the National Department of Health, to get all of the provinces up and running with public-private initiatives or public-private partnerships to really look at vaccines. As you've indicated, Carrie, it's been extremely successful here in the Western Cape. And I know at one stage, Michael Manning gave me some of the stats, and it was hundreds of thousands of vaccines that were given by the private sector. So it's definitely worthwhile.
In fact, in some areas, our private pharmacies are actually superseding our government facilities in terms of seeing numbers and providing our services. So yes, I can tell you that in the metros, a lot of our district pharmacists say they don't know what they would do without our public-private partnerships. They rely heavily on the private sector.
Fantastic. Now, I think pharmacies, we're very accessible, and it's very often it's the longer hours, Carrie. So, a lot of these government primary healthcare clinics, they are closed by the time people are knocking off work. And also, you don't want to go into a hospital and take your baby, especially a 6-week-old baby, into a hospital where there could be TB and all sorts of things. So it is nicer to go into a pharmacy where you're not encountering as many sick people. I'm not saying there are no sick people. But Carrie, it's 8 o'clock. I really want to thank you. A very comprehensive talk. I think all of us are going to have to go back and read the slides because it was a lot of information.
That's a lot. Yeah.
But what I'll do,
if there are any questions that come out, Jackie, you can let me know. I'll happily answer, especially when you've read through some of the information.
Lovely. And
I would
I'm
have
just
loved to have given more. There's so much more I can tell you about, but
we love your passion. And Carrie, I think just to end off, I don't see our chairman on here, but our deputy chairman is on here. So I'm going to ask Gabo just to close off. I will be in contact. And from me, thank you to everybody. I know it's a long day. Well done to all of those that came here. And I'm going to hand over to Gabo.
Yes, thanks, Jackie, and good evening, colleagues. Really, really, I'm amazed. I've got no words. Thank you so much, Carrie. And I think the passion is really permeating. And I believe that pharmacists tonight, they have learned a lot, not a little. And I can't wait to get those slides to start reading indeed and renew my knowledge, because I can see that the gaps are getting huge. But yes, it's an eye-opener, and I believe it's for all of us that have gained knowledge and a few indicators here and there. And I believe that you have really been wonderful, Carrie. And thanks, Jackie, for organizing this. I believe that the PPP are really coming forth, and we want to see them being rolled out nationwide. And Western Cape has been a prime example of the PPP, how it works. And I believe that it will catch up throughout the nation. Gauteng will come through, KZN and so forth. But let me just say at this time, on behalf of the board, let me say thank you very much, Carrie, Jackie, office, everyone that took time tonight to be with us. Thank you very much. I believe it has been valuable. And at this juncture, let me release you and say the webinar is officially being adjourned. I hope you keep well until we meet again. Conference is coming through. Please register. Don't forget, we are join us at the KZN at the upcoming conference of the ICPA. It would have been nice to have Carrie there as well. I think this is very valuable, but we will meet next time. Thank you very much, colleagues, and good night to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Carrie.